So, how does an adopted kid end up building a $2 trillion empire? You know, the story doesn't start where you'd think, not in some slick boardroom or Silicon Valley garage. Nope, it starts on a cross-country road trip. Let's get into it.
Okay, picture this. It's 1994. Jeff Bezos is riding shotgun, hammering out a business plan on his laptop. His wife, Mackenzie, is driving their beat-up Chevy Blazer, leaving a very stable, very lucrative life on Wall Street behind them. They're heading all the way to Seattle, chasing this wild idea that was sparked by just one single, unbelievable number.
And this is the number that changed absolutely everything. Bezos is at his hedge fund job and he stumbles on this stat. The internet was growing at 2,300% a year. That's not a trend, right? To him, that was like discovering a new law of physics. It was a force of nature, and an opportunity so massive, he just couldn't ignore it.
So where did this crazy idea really come from? Let's dig into that, and into the mind of the guy who decided to bet his entire future on that one number.
You have to understand, Jeff Bezos was always different. He was this incredibly brilliant kid, adopted by his dad, Mike Bezos, a Cuban immigrant. And get this, for his high school graduation speech, he wasn't talking about getting a job. He was laying out his detailed dream to build hotels in space. After graduating as valedictorian from Princeton, he lands at a high-powered hedge fund, D.E. Shaw, and by 30, he's already a senior vice president. So when that 2,300% number hits him, he does what a guy like him does. He makes a spreadsheet. He lists out 20 different things you could sell online. CDs, computer software, even dog food. But one idea just kept floating to the top. So the big question is, why books? Out of everything he could have sold, why start there? And this is where you see the strategic genius, right? It wasn't random at all. Books were the perfect product. I mean, think about it. There are millions and millions of titles, way more than any physical bookstore could ever hope to stock. They're small, easy to store, easy to ship, and crucially, a book is a book. You don't need to try it on, it's already standardized. As Bezos himself called it, they were the perfect gateway drug to get people comfortable with the idea of buying stuff on the internet. So he quits his job, Mackenzie quits hers, and they drive west. This next phase of the story is all about pure chaos, insane urgency, and one brutally simple philosophy.
And the timeline here is just ridiculously fast. He founds the company in '94. Quick story, his first name for it was Cadabra, as in abracadabra. That lasted until his lawyer misheard it as cadaver, so yeah, he changed it. He landed on Amazon because it started with an A, putting it at the top of web directories, and it was the biggest river in the world. By July of '95, the website is live, and by 1997, the company, which is still losing a ton of money, goes public.
This mantra, get big fast, was everything. It drove every single decision. They weren't trying to be perfect, they were trying to be fast. They were packing orders on their hands and knees on the floor while still debugging the website. At one point, a programming glitch listed a textbook for $23 million, but none of that mattered. The only thing that mattered was growth and scale. Get big now.
And then the bottom falls out. March 2000, the dot-com bubble bursts. All that insane optimism in the market just evaporates and turns into pure fear. And Amazon, a company famous for burning cash with absolutely no profit in sight, was right in the middle of the storm. As you can see, the stock just got annihilated. It was a total collapse.
The headlines were just brutal. Wall Street analysts started calling it Amazon bomb. People were predicting bankruptcy was just a few months away. Inside the company, the mood turned grim. There were waves of layoffs. The whole grand vision of the everything store suddenly looked like a complete joke. This was it. This was Amazon's near-death experience.
But here's the thing. Amazon didn't die. It survived. And the company that clawed its way out of that wreckage was something totally different. It was colder, more precise, and infinitely more dangerous to anyone who stood in its way. It had become a machine. And this new machine started cranking out some killer ideas. First up, Amazon Prime. When they launched it in 2005, everyone thought it was financial suicide. Free 2-day shipping on everything for a flat fee? It seemed insane. But Bezos understood human psychology. Prime wasn't just a shipping perk. It was a psychological trap. Once you paid that annual fee, you stopped shopping around. Why would you? Shipping is free. It just engineered loyalty.
A couple of years later, they came for the book industry again. Only this time, they weren't just changing where you bought books, they were trying to change what a book even was. The Kindle just quietly and efficiently started replacing paper with pixels, and in the process, it completely upended the traditional publishing business model. And maybe the biggest game changer of all happened almost by accident. Remember that get big fast chaos from the early days? Well, it created a massive internal tech mess. The tools they built to manage their own crazy growth, this flexible on-demand computing power, they decided to rent it out. And that became Amazon Web Services, or AWS. It's now literally the backbone of the modern internet, powering huge companies like Netflix, government agencies like NASA, and even some of Amazon's biggest retail competitors.
But all of this relentless, machine-like expansion, it cast a very long shadow. Because the Amazon machine wasn't just building an empire, it was also destroying others. This famous quote from Bezos basically became a threat whispered across entire industries. It perfectly sums up their predatory philosophy. If you had a business that was making a nice profit, Amazon saw that profit margin as an opening. It was their opportunity to swoop in, undercut you, and take your customers.
And the body count was just staggering. One after another, these giants of retail, companies that had been around for decades, just crumbled. Borders, Circuit City, Toys R Us, the list goes on. Amazon didn't just compete with them, it changed the entire game, and these guys just couldn't keep up.
And that ruthless efficiency was baked right into the corporate culture. Bezos had this mantra: good intentions don't work, mechanisms do. What that means is that feelings and good intentions were irrelevant. Systems were what mattered. You didn't go into a meeting with a flashy PowerPoint. You came in with a data-heavy, 6-page memo that everyone read in silence. It was a culture built on cold, hard logic.
So by the late 2010s, it was pretty clear that Bezos had won the retail war. But just as he reached the absolute peak of his power, it started to become clear that building the world's biggest store, well, that was never really the final goal.
And the personal transformation was just as wild as the company's. The awkward tech nerd with that famous goofy laugh was gone. In his place was this global titan who looked, as a lot of people have said, like the final boss of capitalism.
His last few years as CEO were marked by these huge final moves, buying Whole Foods to get into groceries, getting hauled before Congress to defend his empire. And then, in 2021, he just stepped down as CEO. The architect was leaving the building he'd spent nearly 30 years constructing.
But he wasn't retiring, not even close. He was pivoting. He was going back to that dream he talked about in his high school graduation speech. His rocket company, Blue Origin, became his #1 focus. He was finally going to build those space hotels he'd been talking about since he was a teenager. And this brings us to a really mind-bending final thought. What if this whole thing, this 30-year war on retail, on logistics, on cloud computing, what if that was never the main goal? What if the $2 trillion everything store was just the money-making machine Bezos needed to fund his actual dream? It wasn't his masterpiece, it was just his launch pad. So the real question is, for a man who has already